Tom, where would you like to start today?
Well, we should start by congratulating him, perhaps.
I was going to save that till the end.
Oh,
what did I do now?
Nothing. Well, you'll find out when we get closer to the end, Tom.
We'll tease.
Okay. What would you like to start with?
Well, I think we're going to have to talk about immigration a little bit, because I think those big numbers that were put up in the past couple of days are very important for Quebec and for Canada. And one of the things that I've noticed is that the most recent polling that was published on the issue shows that Quebecers are indeed more open to immigration than people in the rest of Canada. And that came as quite a surprise to a lot of people, but I've been using it to show that across Canada, people are concerned not about immigration, because it's a country built by immigration, but by the lack of preparedness. Because last year we took in 1.2 million new Canadians, and we've got a housing crisis, and we can't provide health care, and we can't do enough for education. So the overall message for people like Mark Miller, who, by the way, I believe is a very good immigration minister federally, and his vis-a-vis, Christine Fréchette here in Quebec, is make sure that your governments understand that if they're bringing in people, that we have an obligation to be able to take care of them.
I'm so glad you seized upon that, because that's what was freaking me out yesterday. I'm like, where's the sense of urgency here? We don't have housing. I mean, I'm all for immigration.
Me too.
Completely pro. But where's the sense of urgency to have a proper plan to care for everyone properly?
Yep.
We don't have housing, like you said. We don't have teachers. We don't have nurses. We don't have doctors. I mean, good grief. And none of the governments seem to have that sense of like, we have to fix this and have a plan in place now.
Well, I mean, the Quebec government did have a plan. It was the former Liberal government, brought in lots of highly qualified teachers from the Maghreb. So those would be countries like Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, French-speaking countries of North Africa.
That was then. This
but
is now.
They happened to be Muslim. So many of them were wearing a hijab, a headscarf. And they were told, oh, well, welcome to Quebec. You've got all your papers. You have all your qualifications. We've given you a top-up at the University of Montreal, so you'd have your Quebec papers at the same time. Of course, you can't work here, because you're wearing something on your head that we don't wear. So you're different from us. So obviously that means you're unqualified. I don't know about you, Natasha, but I've always paid more attention to what people have in their heads than what they have on their heads. Yeah. But apparently that's not the way we look at it here in La Belle Province.
But Tom, what was the issue with Mark Miller when it was about a couple of days before actually announcing the numbers yesterday was, well, we have to rethink this plan. We need to flesh out some more details. And then basically the same numbers announced that you thought weren't going to be announced. Wasn't that a surprise?
It was a bit of a surprise, but I think that there was a lot of pressure on for them to continue in the million arrival range. So he's basically trying to say, we're going to put it at 500,000. But, Aaron, that's a great question, because last year it was supposed to be in that 500,000 range, but they had miscounted and were a lot more. And by the way, that's again the case this year, because there is very little transparency on these numbers. Quebec puts up a number of 50,000. We're only taking in 50,000. That's lower than the 60 they had said, but that's 50,000 plus in another category of people who've been through the Quebec Experience program for universities, another 6,500. Oh, and it has nothing to do with the temporary foreign workers. Oh, and it has nothing to do with this other category and that other category. So actually Quebec's number is way over 100,000 last year, and it will be way over 100,000 this year. But Legault is again playing a political game with this, because he's under pressure from his new arch rivals in the Parti Québécois, who will always beat him on the intolerance, Richter scale. So he's trying to play catch up with this stuff. Oh, by the way, one of my favorite Legault-isms recently was saying, yes, I will meet with the English universities. I will listen. I will hear them, but I won't listen to them, because my mind's already made up. We're doing this. Because, of course, it's all about protecting French, which has just become the new magic formula, right? It's the abracadabra here in Quebec. It's just like, oh, no, we're saving French. But do you have any evidence of that? Have you got a study or any statistics, any valid analysis of this? No, all you have to do is make the magic incantation, and all discussion is supposed to stop.
Can I ask you also about Christine Fréchette saying about Quebec's asylum seekers and wanting to disperse them? Or I wasn't getting a whole lot of sense of what she was saying. It wasn't making sense to me.
Well, this was one of the areas where Mark Miller was weak. We had him on one of the French panel shows that I do last night, and he guffawed at my colleague Paul Larocque, who just asked him a very straight-up question. He said, look, if I look at the map and I look at the numbers and I look at Quebec's population and our importance in Canada, we're taking in a whole heck of a lot more of asylum seekers, refugees, than other provinces. And that made Miller laugh out loud. He said, well, don't ask the people in the city of Toronto. They're convinced that they've got more. But that wasn't an answer from a minister.
No.
What's the answer? Is it indeed the case that Quebec is taking in more? If so, it would actually make sense intuitively to find out that because Montreal is such a hub internationally that we're probably taking in more than our fair share. How many of them wind up staying in Quebec? Because the government will, of course, give them immediate aid. They're going to be given a check. They're going to be given some money so they can buy groceries and start taking care of themselves. But then it takes months and months and almost a year to get the first permit to even be able to contribute and work here. So you've got all of these businesses that are saying, we need employees. You've got all of these people sitting idle because we can't deliver them a permit in time to come and work. So the left hand and the right hand should start working together. But my point at the beginning, referencing Prashant, she's got her values in the right place. I think that she's really one of the more progressive people in the CAQ government sitting around that cabinet table. She's proven it. And she took a real hit in her career to stand up on these questions of principle before she ran for the CAQ. Miller, I think, is simply one of the smartest people around Trudeau's cabinet table. But again, he's got to buckle down and get his work done. It's not enough for him to say, okay, this is my job, I've done this, and now I can go home. If it's a whole of government approach, then where's the real plan for making sure that there is housing, there is healthcare, there are social services, and there is an education possibility for all these great people that we're hoping are going to be able to contribute to Canada. But the 1.2 million that we took in last year, I like using this because it hits people's imaginations. 1.2 million, that's the population of Saskatchewan. And can we bring in a new Saskatchewan every year unless we have a massive plan for building out the housing and all the other things we just mentioned? The answer is no. So where is that plan? The answer is nowhere.
So far anyway. All right, I want to go back to this whole tuition hike thing in Legault yesterday, kind of looking down his nose, if you will, and suggesting that, okay, Bishops is a different case. McGill and Concordia don't hold out any hope. And just a little while ago, Tom, McGill actually finally quantified how much this might cost him. That number is anywhere between $40 and $70, $80 million to lose what they will lose in terms of, students from out of province and other countries.
Right.
Add that to the $60 million Concordia has already talked about.
Yeah.
It seems to me to negate, again, this comes back to this whole idea of when they try to make this seem about like money and had no data to support it. Now you're finding out it would cost us $150 or $200 million in lost revenue. How does the Premier back out of this gently and save face?
That's a great question, and I think that he should try to back out of it gently and try to save face. I mean, the classic thing is you hand it off to a committee of, I think that they're on their third or fourth Comité des Sages, so a committee of wise people to give him advice on this stuff because he makes this stuff up on the fly. That's one of the things you learn about François Legault. He is not studious. I'm not saying he's not smart. He's plenty smart, but he's not studious. He doesn't look at things in detail. He never does. He's never read Bill 96. He has no clue what's in it. He repeats the same statistic ad nauseam, which is, more and more people are speaking other languages at home, as if that had anything to do with the government's business. They're able to work in French and live in French and shop in French and participate in a French-speaking society, but you're going to tell people what language they're allowed to speak at home and use that as your excuse for going after the English-speaking community again. I mean, that's the difficulty that we're having right now, is Legault talks one way to the crowd that's listening to him, but when he takes a real-life decision with no information, no statistics, no foundation like the one that hits the English universities, those numbers from McGill and Concordia, let's call it for the sake of argument $150 million and change, that doesn't even take into account the overall effect on Quebec society. All these people coming in and spending money and renting apartments and doing all the good things that students like to do and contributing. And a lot of them get to work. He doesn't want that. And his only complaint is, according to him, because there's, again, no statistics, no studies on this, is, we're hearing too much English in downtown Montreal, and therefore that must be having a negative effect on French. Baloney. There's never been a higher proportion of people in the greater Montreal area who can hold a conversation in French. Mm-hmm. In the greater Montreal area, that's 95%. It's never been higher. But Legault doesn't want to hear that. He's got his own mind made up, and that's why this meeting with the universities is going to be mostly a waste of time. I'm glad to see McGill finally waking up a little bit because Concordia has been doing yeoman's labor on this thing since day one. They've been out there. They've been pulling this thing. They've been pushing the hardest. Of the three, they've been the strongest. Locally, Bishops has been absolutely amazing. They've been getting as many people in the Sherbrooke and Lennoxville area on site as they can. Massive community support for them. If Legault were to bend one knee, I'm guessing it would be in the case of Bishops because, of course, the whole argument about French doesn't apply in the Sherbrooke area. In the
townships, yeah. I have to say, none of this is making sense to me, though. I mean, listen, we've said this over and over again, but this idea that such a huge proportion of those international tuitions goes to the government, of all tuition goes to the government anyway, this is going to be a huge financial hit for them. Where's that money going to come from?
Oh, And the best people, the people who have done the best analysis of this since the beginning, have proven that time and again. Everybody who has run these numbers has come to the same conclusion. This was supposed to create a bunch of new cash for the French universities. That is absolute baloney. That's not going to happen. And there's a big hit that's going to be taking in terms of the tuition, and most of which got handed over to the Quebec government. And so the Quebec government's going to be taking a hit. This thing is lose, lose, lose across the board. But the biggest loss is for this great international city, one of the two most important university cities in North America, along with Boston. And all that will be lost in terms of great people and ideas and development for the future and experience and expertise. All of that ability to draw in the top people. He's going after it with the tuitions, and then he's going to go after it as he tries to kneecap all of the best university teaching hospitals and their boards of directors, getting rid of them, and big institutions like the Montreal Heart Institute. This is François Legault at his worst. This is François Legault's war on excellence. I guess, he just thinks that mediocrity is much easier, and he's proving that time and again as well.
Tom, real quick, we got to get out of here. We asked our listeners earlier on today, based on that Legault poll where Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon came, of course, ahead of François Legault as the next best premier of Quebec. We asked our listeners who they thought the next best should be, and this woman called and said this.
Yes, I think Tom Mulcair. I have a list of reasons. I think he's moved right since he was with the NDP. I think he would be a good fit as leader of the Liberals. He's fluently bilingual. He would have the Indigenous vote. Perfectly bilingual. His French is flawless. He's very likable. He's very personable. And I think that's kind of the person we need right now.
All right, Tom, there it is. What do you say?
I've hung up my political case, but I'm going to continue to have so much fun with the two of you, analyzing and commenting. Being a pundit is much more fun.
Okay.
Fair enough.
I want to thank your wife for calling. Tom Mulcair, back tomorrow morning with Andrew Carter at 7:40. Thank you, Tom.